Welcome to the Transportation Channel podcast. We're coming to you from ITS America's Conference and Expo right here in Detroit. I'm Michelle Plod, and today I'm joined with Elisebeth Sullivan from TomTom. TomTom is here talking about how maps are becoming more than navigation. They're becoming an essential layer for driver assistance, automated driving readiness, and safer mobility. We'll touch on Orbis maps, lane level mapping, vehicle data, and TomTom's work with Microsoft. But the bigger story is how maps help vehicles and customers understand what is ahead, what is changing, and what decisions need to be made. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So going back in time, in your early part of your career, you joined TeleAtlas all the way back in 2007.
That's right.
And TomTom acquired that company about 10 years into that. So you went through this major transformation in the map industry. I love for you to share with me, with our audience, what has really changed about how people are thinking about maps. Or maybe it's not changed.
I know it's absolutely changed and it's revolutionized in many times in my career. I can think about milestones. So when I think back to when we started, it was very much compile and drive. You're compiling from state agencies and municipalities, and you're on the road driving, collecting vehicle information from mobile mapping, but not yet to the point of vehicle observations, of course. And this is all before we had probe data and centerline accurate data. Then in 2009 and 2010, that's when ADAS, so that really accurate centerline, that really took off. And that again changed the relationship of human and map, and that accuracy changed everything. And then in 2014, that's when we moved from batch mode to transactional map making.
Okay.
And that changed everything yet again, because in this industry, you're always revolutionizing how you're making maps and getting maps into people's hands. And now fast forward to 2019, that's when we made major platform changes that's when we started introducing cloud compute. That's when we really started looking at the ways to be able to speed up to real-time traffic, real-time mapping. And you start moving away from quarterly maps to monthly maps to weekly maps to even every 20-minute downloadable map. And then now we've again changed everything with AI.
Yep.
Because this is just an absolute game changer for how we do maps. And then, of course, now we talk about high definition and autonomy and autonomous driving.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is, again, if you look back to 2007, compile and drive, to all the way to sensor derived, LiDAR, radar, where we can create the entire United States from a sensor map to an HD map in a matter of a few hours. It's things we would have never imagined.
Well, and you talk about ADAS, which is the assisted driving capabilities, right? And then you're talking about that movement into automated driving.
Right.
And, the early stages that you were referring to, it was all about the people getting it and looking at it and knowing how to interpret it. And now you're talking about, an automation of things that are going on, a machine needing to bring in that information and make decisions based on that. Is there a difference between the way humans process and the machines process that data?
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought this up, because when we think about the way that we're building a map, we think about 3 decades of understanding driver behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And all drivers are not the same. And then we look at the way the sensors are able to capture the road, they're able to perform automated acts according to legal laws and all the reactive forms. But there's a big difference between the way a driver will drive as a local and how automation will maneuver, which is more like driving as a robot versus driving like a local. For TomTom, you want both of these things, and that's where TomTom has a place in the industry.
So I'm wondering, if we can talk about Orbis for a moment, and maybe help me understand where the onboard sensors start coming into this, and how does that fit into this, mapping with
That's
Orbis?
right.
Help me understand that.
Sensors change everything for us because it's not just the reactive, the generative AI, the reactive. We also start looking at the way that we can be proactive. So if you think about how an AI is just tangibly tied to all of this autonomy. So if we look at sensors now to be more proactive, we want to be able to couple that with our HD map, and our HD map will be created much from these sensors,
Okay.
sensor data. But I'll just explain really quickly the difference between reactive and proactive. When we look to AI, we're basically saying we've been very far along in textual AI, and we've been able to do that very well. But now we're getting further and further and further in image AI. And that's where we want to move to agentic, and that's where we're moving to be able to predict. So if we are only sensor and we do not have an HD map, then we are only reacting. And where we want to move to the future is the agentic, and that's where we want to move to be able to process and be able to say, I know what's going to happen a mile from now, based off historical view, based off what I understand about the HD map and sensors. So it's a combination of reacting and moving to a proactive approach, because I understand this road, and I also understand the traffic pattern, and I understand driver behavior.
And are you bringing other things in, like weather information, or what what
Yes.
the temperature is at that moment? And
100%. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's an amalgamation of SDO. It's an amalgamation of all of our traffic signals, but it's looking at historical view, so speed profiles. It's looking at all of the traffic statistics. It's looking at the absolute data, the real world data that's happening right now, and then the predictive data. So if you have all of the data from the history, and we have traffic going back all the way to 2017, and we can use that data and also driver behavior, and then we have all of the signals that are happening right now, all the signals that we're getting from the OEMs, and all of the harsh braking, slippage, all of the things that are happening with weather and our incident feeds, and all of the RSUs for road closures and work zones. And then imagine all of the predictive and future. If you fuse all of that together, that's really where Orbis Maps came into play. And that is our new platform from 2022.
Yeah, and so you personally led that original TomTom onboarding for Microsoft, right?
Yes.
And now you're leading that transition to Orbis Maps. So, what does it take to build that kind of trust and major customer adoption over time?
Right. So first off, absolute trust and understanding of their needs, and not just Microsoft's needs, Microsoft's customers, Microsoft's goals. It is understanding their KPIs, their pillars, where they want to grow. In order for me to understand this, then I can start thinking about the prioritization of what features they should migrate first, because there's no such thing as a big bang migration approach when you're talking about every product that we create and our API stack and our uncompiled map. When we talk about this, we have to have a working program. We had to work together very closely with their program team and their engineers. And then we need to be able to come to a common model. And these things come through work streams. And you start to isolate these groups, and then you start forming engineering pairings. And so maybe I'm not involved on a given week because the engineer from TomTom and the engineer at Microsoft start forming these relationships. And they start testing, and they start giving criteria, and they really start to understand the model and the model needs. And that's where adoption can take off. It's actually getting the program lead out of the way and allowing engineers to
To go
pair
solve. Yep.
and actually get things done.
So, what do you find, while this is going in and this great pairing is going on, it's a lot of time and energy to get
Yeah.
that through. And what do you find come some of the bigger friction points
Oh, yes.
in this?
Yeah. So sometimes I notice friction points where we are establishing regression metrics, or we wanted to come up with a common quality metric. Some of the friction point doesn't actually come from the product itself. Sometimes the friction actually comes up with defining success. And I think that that's something that can be taken to a lot of our customers and anyone in the industry is making sure up front, and this doesn't just apply to Microsoft, it applies to many other customers, define your success criteria. It's not just about getting the tasks done.
Yeah.
It is about forming paired quality metrics, sometimes having a set goal on timing. How many hours will this take? In fact, we're working with another partner right now where we are setting a time goal on how fast and how efficient we can migrate from one platform to the Orbis platform, and work streams outlined, and we need to make sure that the friction doesn't increase on defining a success metric.
Sense. Just want to take you to a debate that
Okay.
is big in maps, right?
Yep.
But it's also big, throughout the conference floor here. And it's around the data and what's company owned, what's open source,
Oh,
what's
yes.
crowdsourced,
Yes.
and bring that home to mapping and how is that playing out, and what's the case for TomTom's approach to this? Maybe describe what your approach is, and then
Absolutely.
why is that?
Yeah,
You know, and-
absolutely. I think people know that for TomTom, up until 2021, 2022, we were a proprietary led map. Doesn't mean that we were not consuming government open data, because of course, when we look at our administrative boundaries, our administrative area, census boundaries, of course, a lot of that data is open in the sense of governmental data. But when we start looking at open being defined by OpenStreetMap editors, crowdsourced data, we had not yet taken that journey. And a lot of that is because you need to have a robust product decision engine. And that needed for us meant we needed to have a different license, and we needed to have a robust product create engine where we could be able to isolate open versus proprietary. And so for us, that was one step. The other was in this kind of transformation was making sure that we don't skip any steps whatsoever to a commercial grade map. And so we had to build in a lot of quarantine, normalization, and a lot of these are automated, push button ready now, where we are able to take an OpenStreetMap planet file, we're able to quarantine and clean and have this ready to go, matched to a TomTom commercial model. And so our customers, they can see only the benefit from open data. And at the end of the day, the best of both worlds means you're getting a more powerful map. It doesn't have to be a trade-off of proprietary or open, because at the end of the day, it's about having a more accessible, user-friendly, and also something that is backwards compatible to a lot of users that are already embedding OpenStreetMap into their stack.
So you talked about geography helping answer your curiosity around the world,
Yes.
right? And we talked about the maps and music being, resources available to people also. I know that's part of your thinking. So as you think about these maps becoming more tied to driver assistance, to automation, to the AI-powered map making that we talked about, how are they becoming more accessible or harder for communities and agencies to use?
I think it's becoming more accessible, it's becoming more powerful, and one major change and development, I should say, rather, is the Overture Foundation. And in 2022, TomTom and other tech partners founded the Overture Foundation. And that is a major positive force for making maps more accessible, but also be able to say, starting from TomTom, if you start from TomTom, you're still getting the best of all worlds. And we are also providing our transportation network to the Overture. We're authoring Overture Foundation themes and products. And we're working very closely with the Overture Foundation to make sure that we have a complete schema. And as we are active working schema groups where we utilize our 30 years of experience. And so what Overtures, and if you look at Overture strategy, it is the same as TomTom strategy. This is to get more maps into individuals, organizations' hands as much as possible. And our proprietary layers that would not be a part of Overture, well, that's still, they're always going to be there and it's still going to be accessible. Like our lanes and speed and curvature and gradient and all of those HD features. But the commonality, that interoperability of ID set and transportation road edge and the ability to map match, that's going to get maps into more people's hands.
So I spent some time in the telecommunications industry, and one of the things that we talked a lot about was the being able to get telecommunications capabilities, get that mobile connection, and in certain rural communities, it's much harder to do, right? And that whole industry cooperating together to get that in place. What happens in a community or with individuals if they don't have access to that? Like, what are the repercussions of not having the type of maps that you're talking about?
Right. So in a rural community, there is the ability still to be able to have edits available. There's communities where they could be actually contributing to editing their own map, or there's places where TomTom actually works with communities, and this is happening now with our map partnership team, where we are going actively into certain countries and certain rural communities to uplift the map.
Yeah.
And that's happening right now, actually, in Canada.
Well, what happens when it doesn't exist? Like, I'm able to picture if someone in a community can't get on the internet,
Yes.
I can picture that.
Yes.
What happens if they don't have maps? What's missing in their, that help me understand what this gap, the why it's not good, for a community to not have what they need, and therefore your passion around ensuring that they have the access.
Yeah, without a map, we really can't prioritize. We can't prioritize services for these communities, and we can't understand what happens when we have a disaster. What happens when we need to be able to instruct people on detours for roads that have been washed out, or when people have needs for shelters or access to water. All of this, I think about, unfortunately, the worst case scenario. I think about also being able to just have normal E911 accessible. People need to have, be able to move about from place to place and be able to communicate with one another. And sometimes, in many cases, even in these rural communities, they're needing to be able to be found. They're needing to be able to be evacuated, and a lot of these agencies are using a map or using a TomTom map or an Overture road network. So just thinking about how these communities can be better served.
That's amazing, and even to your point of real time, as things change, because in times of emergency, particularly natural disasters, it's actually changing in real time.
Absolutely.
So it can't be 6 months old. It can't even be 2 days old.
We need to see the traffic pattern happening in this exact moment compared to the historical view.
Well, you made me smarter now. It's something I hadn't even really
It's a
thought
great
through
question.
what that gap was and the implications of it. And it makes total sense.
Exactly.
And so, so thank you for that. But I'm going to ask you, as we, as people leave this conversation, here on the floor, but also, listening to this later, what do you hope they better understand about the role maps play in the next era for transportation?
Oh my goodness, there's so many things to say about what's to come, and I actually think there's a lot of surprises to come, because we've been able to plan probably up until until 2025. But this last year of mapping has been the largest degree of change because of artificial intelligence and our accessibility to these tools and the way that mapping has been reshaped. I can only imagine what the next 6 months will look like. But for me, the takeaway is fresher maps, more accessible maps, and being able to serve greater use cases in the public sector. And when you look at 30 years of map history and understanding how people move about on this in this country, in this state, being able to serve more use cases, that's what I want to do. I want more maps in more people's hands, and I want to be able to use all of our gifts and all of our ability to make safer roads, zero deaths on roads, and be able to help these agencies fulfill their goals.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to end. I appreciate it. I'm very excited about it. You know, future of ITS, it's not just about more sensors, more data, more automation. It is turning those capabilities into trusted, timely decisions that help the vehicles, the customers, the agencies understand, as you're saying, what's ahead. Operate more safely and confidently. And Elisebeth, thank you so much for pushing this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your passion on this. And then, I appreciate everyone who watches the Transportation Channel, and we look forward to continuing the conversation around the future of maps and intelligent transportation. This has been a production of the Transportation Channel. Thank you.